Welcome to the University of Windsor Writing Support Desk's Transitions Workshop Part 2. This part of the workshop will be looking at the function of transitions. In Part 1, we looked at 3 different types of transitions. So looking at the functions of transitions, we'll divide this up into sequential relationships, temporal relationships, spatial relationships, and logical relationships, and we'll provide examples of each. When we think about the word sequential, we can see the word sequence. So we're looking at transition words that show the order of events. For example, for instance, first and firstly might come at the beginning. Secondly, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, then, so on, may come in the middle. And finally, at last, lastly, now eventually may come closer to the end of a set of steps. So in terms of sequential transitions, we're seeing the sequence of events and what order they happen in. For example, first, the researchers selected participants. Second, they surveyed them. Then they calculated the results. Finally, they published their report. So these sequential transitions not only make the writing flow more smoothly, but they show the relationship between the steps in a process. Similarly, temporal transitions show relationships of time. Before, prior to, preceding, in advance of, or by. During, while, at the same time, meanwhile, or as. Later, afterwards, next, then, and subsequently. And again, just as in the prior example, these are not going to be every example of a temporal relationship or a sequential relationship. However, these are just some examples of transition words that we can use to show these types of relationships. You also may notice some overlap between sequential and temporal transitions because we are dealing with time in both cases. Here's an example of temporal relationships. Before starting her paper, she read the instructions. While writing, she took a few breaks. Later, she printed the finished copy. So just by using these 3 temporal transitions, we can see when the events were occurring in relationship to one another. Spatial transitions look at how things relate to each other in physical space. Above, over, overhead, beyond, on top of. Below, under, beneath, underneath. Beside, next to, alongside, behind, in, within. These are just some examples of different spatial transitions that you might use. For example, the writing support desk is in Leddy Library, on the first floor, and adjacent to computers. Below the desk is the basement, and above are many floors of books. So we're showing the spatial relationship between the writing support desk and other floors and items in the library in order to show its location. We're going to spend a little bit more time on logical transitions. These may come up often in our academic writing, and they help us show the logical connections between ideas. And these don't have to necessarily be as concrete. They can be a little bit more abstract. So to add on to something, we might use in addition, moreover, furthermore, also, and. To concede, we might say, of course, to be sure, granted, or that said. To show similarity, we might use similarly, correspondingly, likewise, or equally. To show contrast, we might use however, but, though, or although, alternately, or conversely. And to show consequence or cause and effect, we may use something like therefore, thus, consequently, so, accordingly, hence, as a result, due to, or because. And again, there are many more examples of logical transitions, but these are just some common ones. We're going to break them down in a little bit more detail as well. For logical transitions of addition, here's an example. There are several reasons to learn to cook. For example, you can impress your friends. In addition, you can save money. Furthermore, you can pursue it as a career. So in this case, we are adding on additional examples with each transition. For comparison, we might see something like this. One study suggests that fast food can negatively impact health. Similarly, other research suggests choosing healthy foods. Likewise, doctors recommend avoiding fast food. So we've used similarly and likewise here to show the relationship not only between one study and another study by researchers, but also to compare the similarities to the recommendations of doctors. And using these types of transition words when we're discussing research can show that we understand the research and how it relates to other research on the topic. We also may find that we need to contrast ideas with other ideas. My friend believes in ghosts. However, I don't think they are real, but I realize that I could be wrong. When we need to concede to a degree to the other side of an argument, transitions of concession can be useful. For example, of course, it is important to be impartial. That said, complete objectivity is rarely possible. Still, identifying bias is crucial. When establishing a cause and effect relationship, transitions can be very useful in helping readers understand the logical connections between your ideas. For example, bees require pollen for survival. Therefore, it is important to grow flowering plants. Thus, I will plant a pollinator garden. As a result, my yard will be full of flowers. Finally, transitions of conclusion do just that. They show that we're concluding. In closing, it is important that the jury consider all and only the evidence they have heard in court. We want to be careful here because we will often see students use in conclusion, comma, and then begin the rest of their concluding paragraph. And while this is a useful transition of conclusion, it can often seem a little bit oversimplified or a little bit repetitive with what an instructor might see in many, many other papers. So often we like to advise that if we are concluding in our concluding paragraph, it should be obvious without having to use that transition in conclusion. So just a little caution there. Another quick caution about the word besides. This is a word that often is misused. Besides does not simply mean in addition, and we often see it used to mean in addition, furthermore, moreover. It does add on an additional idea, but it has a specific implication of even if that were not the case. So let's see it in action. I can't go for coffee because I'm working that day. Besides, I don't like coffee. So in this case, besides is adding on a second reason that I can't go for coffee. I've got two reasons, one because I'm working and two because I don't like coffee. However, the implication here is that even if I were not working that day, I still couldn't go because I don't like coffee. So besides here implies I can't go for coffee because I'm working that day. Even if I were not working that day, I don't like coffee. So that's the specific use of besides. How it is often incorrectly used is just to add on a second reason that does not have that implication of even if that were not the case. So I don't like coffee, besides I don't like dancing is a phrase that doesn't really work. I couldn't really say I don't like coffee, even if that were not the case I don't like dancing, because that logically wouldn't make sense. So that's something to keep in mind about the word besides, because it is often misused. In summary, in our first workshop, we looked at types of transitions. Today, we looked at the different functions of transitions in terms of sequential, temporal, spatial, and logical relationships. And then the third part of the transitions workshop, we will be looking at alternatives to transition words. So keep an eye out for that one. And if you do have any questions, feel free to check out our resources on Blackboard, book an appointment via MySuccess with a Writing Support Advisor, or email writingsupport@uwindsor.ca or visit our website at uwindsor.ca/writing support for further information. Thanks for listening and have a great day.